Sidra Kaluska, and welcome back to An Artist's Life. So today I'm getting in my big garden. It's getting to be spring. You can maybe hear the birds in the background. I want to start planting my potatoes today. I may be pushing my luck a little bit. It is a tiny bit on the early side. Some people use St. Patrick's Day as a point of reference for when it's safe to plant potatoes, but you do want to check what zone you're in. I'm in zone 6B, so I should be pretty much okay. There may be some tender greens starting to emerge when we might get our last frost, but I can put a little bit of protection over those sections and it should be fine. These are my seed potatoes. I grew these myself. I got some seed potatoes last spring, and I saved potatoes from my fall harvest, and this is what I have. So when you're planting seed potatoes, you do want to use your smaller potatoes. You don't want to get a huge potato and just plop that in the ground. It'll have lots of eyes, more than what you need for your growing needs. You can see here, this one has quite a few eyes on it. I could maybe get away with cutting it in half, but they're already pretty small. So I'm just gonna leave it as is. I have a couple different kinds of potatoes. This one is red on the outside, and it's also supposed to be red on the inside. For whatever reason, when I grew them last year, they were actually pretty much white on the inside. It could be that my soil was actually so rich for them. It did something weird. I checked with my potato provider, and they weren't sure because they'd never had that happen before. So I'm going to give it another go this year and plant it in a section of my garden where the soil is a little bit rougher, where I didn't have as much composted horse manure in there, so there's a little less nutrients. So see how that one does. And then I also have some French Fingerling potatoes. I was pretty happy with how they grew. I discovered that potatoes kind of grow in two different ways. Your standard potatoes kind of grow in clumps, so you have like the shaft of your plant, and then you'll end up with like a clump of potatoes all right around the same roots. You don't have to dig too far or look too extensively because they're all in one location. With your fingerling potatoes though, they seem to grow a little bit different. They put out some runner shoots, and then along the runner shoots you'll have potatoes following those lines. So it's a little bit more of a treasure hunt to find them. But I'm doing compacted gardening. I don't have a ton of space, so I'm trying to get in as much as possible without overdoing it. So I'm planting them in a 1-foot grid. We don't eat a ton of potatoes, or I don't eat a ton of potatoes, so I'm not going to go too overboard. I'm going to plant around 30 plants, ballpark. I'm just going to do 2 rows going straight back because I also want to make sure that I have room for all of the other plants that I want to get in there. And I've taken into consideration some plants that I'm not supposed to plant next to each other, like my potato and tomato. They need to have a good bit of distance. So that's what I have for my 2 kind of fingerling varieties. I also had an early red potato too, and I guess since it's early, it's wanting to grow a lot sooner than the other ones go. You can see it's already started to put out some kind of greens on the tip, so they definitely want to be planted. They have some nodules going here. Potatoes definitely looking pretty sad at this point. This is actually on the large side for using as a seed potato. I might just go ahead and plant the whole thing. Part of me is also considering trying to just break off the plant section because I can see it's already trying to put out roots. So if it's in a moist soil, I think it'll go ahead and put out some roots, and then at that point it can start sustaining itself. Because the potato itself is just kind of like a docking station essentially. It's its home until it can develop a home outside of this little biome. So I might break some of them off. Some of them, like this one, is pretty sad and dried out all the way around. It has quite a few eyes on it. I think I'll just go ahead and plop this one in the ground. Some of the ones that look a little bit bigger that just have 1 or 2 shoots on it, I might just snap those off and take the rest of the potato into the kitchen and use it for something in there. So since these are my earlier potatoes, I want to separate them a little bit from my later potatoes. Both of the fingerlings are a little bit like the mid-season or later, so I'm going to plant those toward the front of the garden. And my early potatoes I'm going to plant at the back of the garden, and I'm going to kind of separate them because it makes it easier to harvest and figure out what needs to be dug and what needs to be left alone. These will definitely mature a lot faster, and when the plant starts to die back, I can harvest them. Last year was a little bit weird. We kept getting cool spells that were pretty wet, so you want to harvest potatoes when it's on the dry side. As a result, I had a patch that just kind of kept growing, so I actually harvested them in the fall, and that's actually why I have some of them left, because we didn't get a chance to eat them until they got into the basement in the fall season. So when you start planting your potatoes, you want to dig a trench, and you want to plant your plants at least 1 foot apart. That's the setup that I'm using. Sometimes they recommend that you plant the plants 1 foot apart and then the rows 2 to 3 feet apart. I just don't have the room for it, so I'm doing compact planting. And since I'm not doing a mass amount of them, I can get in between the plants fairly easily because I can access it on both sides of the row. And when you're planting them, you want to maybe line your trench with some organic matter to help fertilize the potatoes. And then after you put them in the trench, you want to put in around 3 to 6 inches of dirt on top. It kind of depends like what your temperatures are like, if you're expecting a freeze or whatnot. So I'm going to probably put about maybe 4 or 5 inches on top, and then when they start emerging at that point, I'll mound some more dirt on top, and I'll be probably getting a load of some goat manure hay later this season, and when I get that in, I'll use that to also mound around the potatoes as well. So what that does is it helps keep the roots cool, because potatoes are actually a cool weather crop. So if their roots get too warm, they don't produce nice tubers, and it also just doesn't, the plant isn't as happy. So using the dirt and everything to help protect the roots ensures that you get a better root crop, and it also protects the roots from getting any sunburn, because if they start producing any of their chlorophyll at that point, it's actually toxic because they're in the nightshade family. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I think it's time to get started. Yay!